Are your ancestors a bunch of nobodies? Hmm. Let's talk about that right after this. Thanks for joining me today for this video. This one's a little different. I asked the question at the beginning, are your ancestors all nobodies? Well, lots of times when I tell people that I'm working on my family history, I get a reaction along the lines of, well, I don't think I'd ever do that because, my ancestors weren't really anybody special. Uh, so, I just wouldn't bother doing that. Okay, that makes me a little sad. No, that makes me very sad. Because first of all, how do you know they're a bunch of nobodies if you haven't done the research to find out who they are and what they did? Second, how do you find or how do you define that they are nobody special? Or really, nobodies is what you're saying. How would you define that? Well, my ancestors, when I first started finding them, I certainly didn't have anybody that anybody would say is of any importance that I knew of in my family. My father was a steel worker. My mother was a homemaker. But seriously, I think my father being a steel worker, especially during the area that he was a steel worker, for part of that time at least, these steel mills were pumping out steel that was being used for buildings throughout America. For the war, World War II, steel for airplanes, for tanks, and other military equipment. Okay, my mother was a homemaker. Oh, boy, I considered her very important. Very important. She kept our household running. My father worked rotating shifts. So, boy, yeah, you could hardly tell when he was working what shift. He would write, I guess he'd get his shift schedule about once a month. And he'd write it up on a little calendar that we had in a small hallway where we go down from the kitchen down to the basement. So if we wanted to know if Dad was going to be anywhere at any particular time, we'd have to check that calendar. But meanwhile, my mother, she kept the household running. She kept me running, to be honest. She encouraged me as far as schoolwork is concerned, as far as everything was concerned, really. So I consider her and all homemakers very important people. Okay, what about the rest of my ancestors? I think they all fall in the same category pretty much. There was, as I did the research, I did find one that was a county commissioner. Yeah. I found one that was a Civil War veteran. I found one that was a Revolutionary War veteran. Now, to be honest, both the Revolutionary War veteran and the Civil War veteran were privates. So did they do anything important in the Civil War? Did they do anything important in the Revolutionary War? Well, I think they did just by being there. Now, my Civil War veteran, the first time he went in, he volunteered. Now, after he came home for a little while, Lincoln instituted a draft. He didn't have a draft at first because he just didn't think that war was going to last very long with the North fighting against those, backwoods Southerners. But it did last longer. And he did get hurt while he was fighting in the Civil War. And I found his Civil War pension records at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. I think that's important. I think they both were very important in the developments of this country. Now, the county commissioner, Yeah, he was a county commissioner, but it was in a very rural area in south central Pennsylvania. Was it any place important? Well, certainly not when he was a county commissioner. But I would say that's important, that he stepped up and volunteered to help run this county in Pennsylvania. I think that's important. But I think other ancestors were important too. Another one in that same county where the county commissioner was, they owned a general store. They provided supplies for people in this rural area that they couldn't supply themselves, whether it was foodstuffs, clothes, things, materials to make clothes, shoes, uh, whatever it was. I think that's important. Had several ancestors that were coal miners coming from southwest Pennsylvania. Yeah, you would expect that, huh? As well as being steel workers. Tough work. Really tough work, working in the coal mines. I consider that important. They were getting the coal that could maybe heat homes. House I grew up in had a coal chute on the outside where they would shovel coal in to go to the coal heater. Now I don't remember that at all. I when I was alive, we just had a gas furnace. The coal also made sure that the trains could run, coal power. The coal also ran machinery in industrial places in this country, all over the country. So I consider that very important too. Farmers. Some of my ancestors were farmers. Oh, yes, that was important, especially further back when foodstuffs couldn't travel across the country. They couldn't because it would take too long. The food would be ruined by the time it got somewhere. So it was providing all the local people with food they needed that they couldn't grow themselves because not all people could grow all foods themselves. So please, if anyone gives you that answer that I said some people gave to me, or maybe you're thinking that yourself, maybe you've been doing some family history research for a while and you're getting a little frustrated because you haven't found any famous or important people in your ancestry. Well, I'll tell you, the vast majority of people in this country are in that same boat. But I would ask you to adjust your definition of important because so many people in this country did so many things that keep this country running. They themselves might not even have understood what their important role was. But it was. It was very much. And even my ancestors that came over from another country, my grandmother's parents came over from Poland. She emphasized to her children, if they had picked up any Polish, not to speak any Polish and not to let anybody know that their parents came from Poland. Because they thought, I assumed, that they would be discriminated against. Or, they wanted to make sure that they're integrated into the lives of this country, of the other people around them. I think it was pretty important that those people came over from those other countries because that's why I'm here. Maybe I would never have been born if they didn't come over. And if I had, well, I'd have been living somewhere else that I just don't believe is quite as good as the United States. Just saying. So please, correct those people with kindness. If they say, well, I'm not going to, I'm not going to find my family history because there's nobody important there. And that first thing I said is maybe the most important one. Well, how do you know? How do you know? You might have someone maybe even more important than the people I thought were important. And if you have that feeling, or if you're getting frustrated because of it, yeah, please adjust what you think is important too. That's all I ask. I feel very strongly about that. So, hey, that's all I wanted to say today. Thanks again for watching my channel, and I'll see you next time on the road to your family history.